The following is an AZPM original production.
Arizona Science is supported by Research Corporation for Science Advancement.
For Arizona Public Media, I'm Tim Swindle, Professor Emeritus of Planetary Science at the University of Arizona, and this is Arizona Science. Joining me today is John Wiens, a Professor of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Arizona. Welcome back, John.
Thanks, it's great to be back.
Several years ago, in fact in fall of 2019, we discussed studies trying to figure out which animals have eaten what kind of diet over millions of years. Your group recently published a study in which you concluded that animals with higher body temperatures are more likely to become herbivores. That raises a number of questions, but let me start with the basic one. How do you figure out what animal was eating what millions of years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, we use an evolutionary tree, right? So for example, for tortoises, we know that basically every single species eat plants. So from that, we know that they've been eating plants for at least as long as tortoises are old. So we take our time-calibrated evolutionary tree, and we can figure, say, that tortoises are 40 million years old. So we know that that group has been eating plants for at least 40 million years.
And how do you figure out what an extinct animal's body temperature was?
That we kind of use the same approach, but we're sort of asking, we're kind of looking at the body temperatures of living species, and then looking at this correlation between their changes in diet and their body temperatures.
And over what period of time do these changes occur, going from herbivore to carnivore or the other way?
So across all animals, it goes back at least 800 million years. But we specifically looked at tetrapods, that's land vertebrates, so it's birds, mammals, lizards, snakes, turtles, amphibians. And they go back 350 million years. But one of the interesting things that we found out is that amongst living species, herbivory only goes back about 110 million years. So all of the herbivorous groups that we see today are all relatively young.
Are there any sort of recent examples of animals switching back and forth?
Oh, yeah. All the switches from carnivory or omnivory to herbivory are in the last 110 million years. But they're switching back at at sort of a similar rate. And so, let's see, there's lots of mammals, lots of examples in mammals of things starting off as herbivores and then switching back to being carnivores and omnivores.
Can you give an example?
Polar bears might be one. There's a couple of kinds of whales that might also be doing that. And there's various kinds of birds that have gone from being herbivores to go back to being omnivores.
Is it true of modern animals that the herbivores have higher body temperatures than the carnivores?
Yeah, that's generally the case. In order to be an herbivore, you have to have a high body temperature. So if you go out in the desert, it'll be hot. There's lots of lizards with high body temperatures. Only some of them are eating insects. Some of them are eating plants. So we think that that's a necessary precursor to being an herbivore is that you have to have a high body temperature.
Where do our favorite omnivores, humans, fit into this?
We've got pretty high body temperatures. So for example, it seems like the minimum body temperature that you need to be an herbivore seems to be about 86 degrees Fahrenheit.
And where do cold-blooded animals fit into this?
They show the same pattern, right? But they also have that limit. It seems to be about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That's kind of the minimum to be an herbivore.
Where did the idea of comparing body temperature to diet come from? Was this just looking at data sets, or was there some clue?
Some other folks had talked about this, and they specifically looked at it in birds and mammals, but they actually looked at the kind of the opposite question. They sort of asked, how does diet determine body temperature? And they kind of found mixed results. Some folks also looked at some lizards and say, it's kind of mixed results. But we actually asked a different question. How does body temperature determine diet? And there's a strong relationship for that in every single group. So we kind of flipped the question around a little bit and then get a much stronger pattern.
What's the next step on this?
Well, it's part of figuring out that bacterial aspect of it much better. So for example, is it the same bacteria? And, more rigorously establishing this kind of functional relationship between the body temperatures and feeding on plants and breaking down the plant cell walls.
Thanks for coming in, John.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Our guest today has been John Wiens, an expert in evolutionary biology whose group has been studying the factors that make animals carnivores or herbivores. This is Tim Swindle, and you have been listening to Arizona Science. You can also listen to this and to other Arizona Science segments, including a previous segment with John, by going to the AZPM website at azpm.org.
Thank you to Research Corporation for Science Advancement for their support of Arizona Science. AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.